I'm Peggy. The room was deathly silent as I placed 2 pieces of paper on the table. My mother-in-law Edith stared at me with a mix of shock and anger, her face turning a shade of red I'd never seen before. The air was thick with tension, and all eyes were on me. It all started a few years ago when I married my husband, Jack. We lived in a small, cozy house in Elmwood. Jack worked at a local carpentry shop, always coming home with sawdust in his hair and a kind smile on his face. I was a bookkeeper, handling the finances of various small businesses. We had a blended family. Jack had 2 older children from his previous marriage, 13-year-old Tom and 11-year-old Lily. And I had my little girl, Lucy, who was 7 at the time. Lucy was a bundle of energy and creativity, with her drawings plastered all over our refrigerator. Every Sunday, we drive to Jack's childhood home in Pine Ridge. Edith was a strict and traditional woman. From the very first dinner, I noticed the way she treated Lucy differently. She'd say, "How's Peggy's girl?" As if Lucy didn't belong in the family. Tom and Lily always got the best seats and the extra helpings, while Lucy was often told to be careful or to wait her turn. One Christmas, I watched as Edith handed out gifts. Tom and Lily had large piles, but Lucy received just a small box, like a token gift. When I said something, Edith simply replied, "Children shouldn't be spoiled." Jack's father, Henry, just sipped his coffee and said nothing. The refrigerator in their house was a clear sign of the favoritism. It was filled with Tom's school photos and Lily's awards, but not a single one of Lucy's drawings. Lucy would bring a new one every visit and give it to Edith, only to find it later in the recycling bin, flattened as if Edith couldn't quite throw it away but didn't want to keep it either. Edith came from a family that placed a high value on blood relations. Their family had owned a large farm for generations until the bank took it away. To her, blood was the only thing that truly mattered. I understood her perspective, but it was hard to watch my daughter being treated this way. Then, Henry's health started to decline. His doctor put him on a series of expensive medications, and the co-pays were adding up to about $600 a month. Their old farmhouse also needed a new roof, which would cost around $7,000. Henry's pension could barely cover the basics, so I started to help. I didn't tell Edith that the money was coming from me. She assumed it was Jack's hard-earned money from the carpentry shop. I set up the payments and kept meticulous records, not because I planned to use them, but because that's what I do as a bookkeeper. I thought love should be selfless and invisible, but I was wrong. I tried to stand up for Lucy a few times. The first time, I sat Edith down at her own table and told her that Lucy was her grandchild and that the cold treatment had to stop. Edith folded her hands and said she treated all children the same, then asked if I'd brought the receipts for Henry's medications. Another time, I told Jack I was done funding a house where Lucy was made to feel like an outsider. I had the bank app open, ready to cancel the recurring transfers. But then, Henry had a heart scare and ended up in the emergency room. I couldn't stop the help, and Jack asked me to give his mother more time. I gave in, hoping that things would change. But things took a turn when Jack and I decided to make Lucy's place in the family official. One evening, Jack came home from work, sat on the edge of Lucy's bed while she slept, and then found me in the kitchen. He said he wanted to adopt Lucy, to make her his daughter in every legal sense. We hired a family attorney in the county seat. Since we'd been married for over a year and Lucy had lived with us since she was 4, the process went smoothly. Her biological father had signed away his rights long ago, so there was no one to oppose the adoption. 6 weeks before Jack's birthday, we went to the courthouse. A judge asked Jack if he understood the full implications of adoption, and Jack said yes before the judge even finished the sentence. Lucy got to bang the gavel, and we took a photo of that moment. From that day on, Lucy's last name was the same as ours. We decided to keep the adoption a secret until the right moment. Jack's birthday seemed like the perfect time. We hoped that the official adoption papers would finally soften Edith's heart. I kept the adoption decree in a manila envelope and brought it to the party, tucked away in my bag. Edith announced that she would host the birthday party at Pine Ridge this year. Usually, I was the one to host, and she'd always found something to criticize. This time, she said she wanted it to be a family-only event and her daughter, Rose, would handle the details. Rose was 42, recently divorced, and she seemed to orbit around Edith like a satellite. She'd moved back home after the divorce and was in charge of all the family's precious items and the seating arrangements. I offered to cook and bring the cake, as I always did. But Rose said they wanted to keep it simple and handle everything themselves. I let it go, but I still ordered the cake because Lucy had asked for a strawberry-topped one with our names piped on it. I wrote down the names: Jack, Peggy, Lucy, Tom, Lily, Edith, Henry, and Rose. 8 names, a symbol of our growing family. On the day of the party, we drove to Pine Ridge on a cloudy Saturday. The cake box was strapped into the middle seat like a third passenger. Lucy wore a pretty pink dress she'd picked out herself and held a rolled-up drawing on her lap, a surprise for Jack. Tom and Lily were in the back, bickering playfully about a video game. Jack hummed along to the radio, and I watched the fields pass by, feeling a glimmer of hope. When we arrived, Edith greeted us at the door. She gave Jack a hug, nodded at Tom and Lily, and gave Lucy a half-hearted smile. The house smelled of roast beef and polish. The dining room was set with the fancy china and cloth napkins, but when I counted the chairs and plates, there were only 7. I counted again, thinking I must have made a mistake, but it was still 7. Before dinner, the neighbors, the Johnsons, came by to drop off a card for Jack. Edith lit up and proudly introduced Tom and Lily as her grandchildren, talking about Tom's future in sports. Lucy stood a few feet away, holding her drawing, waiting to be introduced. But Edith's hand never left Tom's shoulder, and the Johnsons left without even learning Lucy's name. Lucy tugged on my sleeve and whispered, "Mommy, am I a grandkid, too?" I knelt down on the polished floor and told her yes, that she was loved and important. But behind me, I heard Edith and Rose in the kitchen, talking about the seating. Edith said, "This table is for blood." Lucy heard it, and I saw the pain in her eyes. She didn't cry, but she became very still, and I knew then that she understood more than I thought. Jack was outside on the porch, chatting with Henry and the neighbor about carpentry. He missed all of this. I decided to wait, to see how far Edith would go. I kept Lucy close and my bag closer, knowing that inside it were the adoption decree and a folder with 3 years' worth of records of the money I'd spent on their family. Dinner was ready, and Edith called everyone to the table. Rose came over and suggested that Lucy might be more comfortable in the den, saying there was a TV and a folding tray. She framed it as a kindness, but I knew it was an excuse to keep Lucy away from the table. I told her Lucy was fine where she was. Rose's smile tightened, and she lowered her voice. She said that after dinner, they were taking family photos for the hallway, and they wanted only the real grandchildren in them. I realized then that this was all pre-planned. Edith came in with the roast and the carving knife. She looked at Lucy standing by my side and said, "Lucy, honey, come here a minute." Henry, who had come in from the porch, saw what was happening. He said, "Edith, she's just a little girl. Let her sit." But Edith just told him to stay out of it. Before Edith could lead Lucy away, Lucy walked over to Jack, who had just come in from the porch. She unrolled her drawing and held it up with both hands. "Happy birthday, Daddy," she said. It was a drawing of all of us, with big heads and small bodies and a bright sun in the corner. Jack got down on one knee and looked at it with tears in his eyes. "This is the best present I've ever gotten," he said. But Edith's face turned cold. She said, "That's a nice drawing, sweetheart," in a tone that made it clear she didn't really mean it. Then she said, "All right, dinner's getting cold." Lucy needed to go to the bathroom before dinner. While she was washing her hands, I reached into my bag for a tissue, and the manila envelope with the adoption decree slipped out and landed face up on the floor. There it was, under the bathroom light, the official document making Lucy Jack's legal daughter. I picked it up, smoothed it out, and made a silent promise to myself. If Edith laid a hand on Lucy again, I would show this paper to everyone. Back in the dining room, the situation escalated. Rose put her hand on Lucy's back and started to lead her away. I moved to stop her, but Edith stepped in between us. She put her hand on Lucy's shoulder and said, "The children who belong at this table will sit at it. Lucy can eat in the den. It's nicer for her." I looked Edith in the eye and said, "She's staying at this table." Edith's pleasant expression hardened. She said, "Peggy, let the real children sit with their father tonight. It's his birthday. Lucy isn't really his." That's when I'd had enough. I reached into my bag, took out the manila envelope, and walked to the table. I said, "Edith, for 3 years, I've sat at your table and let you decide who counts. But love isn't about blood. It's about who shows up. 6 weeks ago, Jack adopted Lucy. This is the court order." I laid the paper on the table, and the room fell silent. Edith stared at it, her face paling. Then I took out the folder with the financial records. I said, "You said this table is for blood. Let's talk about who's been keeping this family going. Over the past 3 years, I've paid for Henry's medications, the new roof, and the groceries. It's cost me nearly $45,000, and not a cent of it came from Jack's wages." Edith's eyes widened in shock. Henry looked at her and said, "Edith, it's all true." Edith got angry, shouting that I had no right to bring money into the family. But I stayed calm. I said, "You're the one who brought money into this when you decided who could sit at the table. I just kept track of it." Jack stepped forward and said, "Mom, you pushed my daughter out the door. Lucy is my daughter, and we're leaving. The money that's kept this house warm will stop tonight." Tom stood up and said, "She's our sister. If Lucy can't sit here, I don't want to either." Lily followed her brother. We gathered our things and walked out the door. Lucy looked back at the house, not sad but resolute. In the car on the way home, Lucy asked, "Did I do something wrong?" Jack replied, "No, you did everything right just by being you." She fell asleep soon after. I stopped the recurring transfers that week. But I still set up a direct payment to Henry's pharmacy for his essential medications, with a condition that Edith had to acknowledge Lucy as her grandchild before we'd discuss further help. Henry called to apologize, but Edith and Rose never did. Our refrigerator in Elmwood is still covered with Lucy's drawings. She still draws our family as a happy group of 5, and I've learned that blood may determine who you're related to, but it's the people who show up that truly make a family.